rights and charity group Oxfam has revealed stark inequalities in the global supermarket supply chain. So while the owners of supermarket chains have enjoyed a bumper season, food producers and workers continue to experience extreme hardship due to the coronavirus pandemic. Between 2019 and 2020, total dividends paid to shareholders increased from $10 billion to $22.3 billion. That's an increase of 123%. On average, a food producer packing shrimp, for example, in Thailand, picking coffee beans in Brazil, or grapes on a South African wine farm earns less than 1% of the retail price. The report, entitled "Not in This Together," challenges wealthy nations to do more to invest in a more equitable supply chain. Let's get to the latest on the story now. We're joined by Rachel Colbourne. She's the Oxfam Global Campaign lead. Rachel, it's great to talk to you this morning on what is such an incredibly important story. Of course, what you've revealed in this report isn't new. It's just all the more stark because of the pandemic.
That's exactly right. Thanks for having me, and thanks to your viewers for watching. That's what we're seeing. You know, inequality is excessive, and what we've seen with the COVID-19 pandemic is that it's just made it worse, and especially in this supermarket supply chain. You know, during the pandemic, only a few businesses were able to be open, and supermarkets were really our lifeline and feeding us. But what we've seen is that those people that are risking their lives to put food on our table aren't having enough money to eat themselves. And so we've just seen that the supermarket shareholders are getting increased dividend payouts, while the workers in the other end of the supply chain don't even have enough money to feed their families.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers are so incredibly shocking. Dividends paid to shareholders increasing 123%, going from $10 billion to over $22 billion. As you say, most workers not earning a livable wage. What are you aiming to do with this report, Not in This Together?
Yeah, that's right. Well, it's clear we're not in this together. Many of us have lost our jobs. 3.7 trillion people have lost their jobs during the pandemic, and women and young people are the worst hit. And so what we want to do through this campaign is get supermarkets who have a lot of power in the global food supply chain to really play their role and provide a living wage for workers, step it up for women. Women are really being hit the hardest across the whole supply chain, no matter if it's coffee from Brazil, shrimp processing in Thailand. We see that women are in the lowest paid roles, the most insecure roles, and have been hit the hardest in the pandemic. So we really want supermarkets who have global influence and power to address this at a systemic level, implement action plans on gender, and implement gender policies. We'd like them to give living wages to workers, ensure that people just have a living wage, enough to eat. I mean, is that really too much to ask? We really want them to just change their corporate business model. How can it be possible that they're increasing their payouts to shareholders while the people who are actually providing the food that they put on their shelves, that we're eating on our kitchen tables, don't even have enough to eat themselves? So they really need to take this opportunity to change that business model. COVID-19 is just one shock in the system, and it's clear that workers don't have the safety nets in their work to handle these shocks, and we're only going to see more. And we say that supermarkets do have that responsibility. You know, they're the biggest winner. They're some of the biggest winners in this pandemic. And with that, they have big responsibility to ensure all the workers, farmers, producers in their supply chains have enough food to eat, are protected from COVID-19. You know, they didn't really give much at all to help protect their workers. So we're really asking them to just ensure there are personal protection measures in place for all workers in their supply chain, gender policies, living wages, and just take this opportunity to change the business model. You know, we can't go on as business as usual. That is clear.
So, Rachel, I mean, essentially what you're saying is that Oxfam is sort of appealing to the better nature of these businesses. You know, there's nothing that sort of legislates that they do the right thing here?
Yeah, well, legislation is different in each country. And so our partners and colleagues on the ground and these workers are really fighting in their own context for all those different measures in place at the legislative level. In Europe, we're seeing new mandatory human rights due diligence legislation being pushed, and we're very supportive of that. And so that all supply chains can be reached.
Yeah.
And what we're saying is that business has a responsibility, government must enforce that responsibility, and that we have the opportunity to do the right thing. And we're seeing supermarkets move. We've been working on this campaign for several years now, and we've seen Lidl implement better workers' rights measures, and that they have a huge impact on lots of supply chains. There are 10,000 stores in 32 countries. So we're really targeting supermarkets in the global supply chain because we know they have power to address a systemic issue and not just one value chain.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to hone in on South Africa because it's one of the 5 countries that your report does focus on in terms of workers receiving only 1% of the retail price. You're talking about workers who work on wine farms in South Africa. Give us a sense, Rachel, of who are the worst affected. You've already said that of the workers that are disenfranchised by this, call it this level of inequality, women are again the hardest hit.
That's absolutely right. It's definitely the women. Women have the most insecure contracts. In Brazil, we're seeing that the pay gap is even worse for women, even though workers in the coffee industry have higher education than their male counterparts. They're still getting paid less. In coffee farms in South Africa, they're fighting for a living wage. Our partner Women on Farms project is working really hard with the women on wine farms to make sure that they just get a living wage. And they'll be releasing a report later this year that goes more in depth on that particular issue in South Africa. But what we're saying is that we must address this at a systemic level. There's wine farm workers in South Africa. There's women processing shrimp in Thailand. There's basmati rice farmers and workers in Pakistan. And to address only one of these supply chains would really not just address the whole inequality. And we're saying supermarkets have the power to really have an impact on a whole range of supply chains, and that these workers really deserve to be able to feed themselves and their families, especially since they're feeding the rest of us.
Yeah, at the very, very least. Rachel Colbourne, thanks very much for your time this morning. An incredibly important story. I understand Oxfam's provided these supermarket chains with a copy of that report, and reportedly some of them are open to changing their business models across supply chains to try and promote equality. That's a big story that, of course, we'll keep our eyes on for you. Rachel Colbourne is Oxfam Global Campaign Lead. Thanks once again.